I've never understood why some people use the term grinding as a negative, as if it automatically means bad. The term grinding really is just shorthand for engaging with a game's systems a lot. Why can it be the thing that's fun with some games and the thing that's tedious and burns you out on others? Last week, I wrote a post asking my audience, what video would you want to see me make? My favorite suggestion came from William Liddell, so thank you William, and to all who replied to my post. He wrote, I'd love a video on grinding. What makes good grinding and what makes bad grinding? I will answer that question directly, but by the end of this video, we're going to discover that it actually points to a deeper question. We've all felt the rush of novelty and excitement that is so often found with our first hour in a game. Everything's fresh, the aesthetic, the vibe, and yes, the combat. But what's fun and exciting in hour 1 might not be as fun in hour 40. I've discussed this concept before, but I'm talking about hedonic adaptation. Basically, we get used to things over time. A new game feels exciting at first, but that initial spark doesn't last forever. But here's where games complicate things. Many RPGs are long, and they rely on sustained player engagement over time. I remember playing a delightful little indie RPG called Last Dream some years back. You make your party, and the early game was pretty damn scrappy. You really are fighting just to survive and keep your party healthy in the very early stages of the game. I remember feeling the need to do a fair bit of grinding early on, but once my party rounded out with better abilities and I was able to pretty easily trek great distances without wiping, I fell into a groove. After the first few hours of a pretty heavy grind experience, I was set to go because I had already been properly leveled for the challenges the game would later throw at me. Games that backload a grind session, by contrast, can feel worse. This was an issue I remember having with Eiyuden Chronicle. There are 3 main characters, 2 of whom weren't very good or required members for most of the game, and therefore they sat on my bench. But then, they get forced into 1v1 fights at the very end of the game. I was ready to move on and finish the game, but got bogged down with a forced endgame grind instead. If a game is going to force or soft force grinding, I think it's probably wiser to do so earlier in the experience, before the inescapable force of hedonic adaptation kicks in. Repetition is at its worst when nothing in the experience evolves alongside it, and that raises the question, how do great games keep repetition feeling fresh? One of the best ways to refresh a game is to transform how it plays. A crucial piece to the puzzle of a good grinding experience is a progression and reward system that is worth grinding for. Love it or hate it, I think classic World of Warcraft was a stunning example of what I'm talking about. In the olden days, leveling a character from 1 to 60 was no small feat, but even with the months-long investment required, so many players like me were motivated to do it because the game had excellent progression. Especially early, but all throughout the leveling journey there were new abilities, spells, and milestones you were uncovering. Things like teleporting to change far travel, or shapeshifting to fundamentally alter the gameplay, or even procuring mounts to make zone travel more efficient. What I think is important to appreciate here is that a well-designed progression system isn't merely a carrot on a stick that motivates the player to hit certain milestones. It's a system that, when such milestones are hit, fundamentally transforms the player experience and how they can engage with the next grind to the next milestone. In other words, the reward that you were so incentivized to work toward, once attained, resets hedonic adaptation because the reward itself transforms the experience. This is one key difference between good grinding and bad grinding. Bad grinding is, oh no, the boss one-shots me, let me level until they don't. Number go up, I can pass the stat check, yay. Good grinding, by contrast, is less about stat checks and more about transformation. Instead of +3 strength, +1 intelligence, +2 dexterity, you unlock things like double jump, summon pet, class change, powerful new ability, and so on. Things that, once unlocked, enables you to approach scenarios entirely differently. Having milestones to work toward that are attractive, transformational, and motivating is good design to be sure. But are there things a well-designed game can do to spice up the grind itself? Sometimes a single design twist can transform a boring grind into something compelling. Some close friends and I have been playing a lot of MMORPG Albion Online recently. A popular activity in this game is an extraction-style roguelite dungeon called The Depths. The dungeon is simple, has good loot, and is frankly boring, but for the key twist. You can only extract or go deeper after 15 minutes of the floor being open. Leaving means you extract safely with your winnings, while going deeper opens up better potential rewards. And the key risk is that you're trapped on the floor with many other parties of players who are trying to do the same thing. And PvP is always on. When teams fight, the team that wins the fight gets to loot the other's winnings from the run. Runs can be eerily quiet for a while, and then in the blink of an eye, you're thrust into a significantly more difficult fight with real stakes. And it really does work. When my friends and I are dungeon crawling, we're a little bit on edge. We hear footsteps down the hall, but we don't know if that's another player or a harmless mob. You carry an understanding that turning a corner could pose that kind of danger, risk, and reward. These same principles work in almost any popular roguelike game. It's the idea that something unexpected can happen at any moment that interrupts the pattern of your grind and catches your attention. But all the flair in the world isn't going to save a game that has weak fundaments. While there are many elements that can make grinds better, others create unnecessary friction. Not friction of challenge or narrative tension, as I've talked up in a dedicated video, but rather friction that makes play sessions feel tedious and exhausting. Sometimes the difference between games that are fun to grind and games that are fatiguing comes down to the gameplay itself. The more fun, varied, or snappy the gameplay, the higher the tolerance we'll have for grind sessions. I know, thanks Captain Obvious, but hear me out. Some games certainly have more engaging combat than others. It might be that there is more enemy variety, or the amount of characters or abilities you have are greater. It might even just be how tightly the whole combat experience is designed. Fun, quick, snappy combat keeps things moving along. But it might be better to look at games that are still widely beloved, but are less optimized in this regard. For example, there's an internet famous story of the YouTuber Circle Master, linked in the description, when he leveled Cloud and Barrett to level 99 in the first Mako reactor in FF7. He is now trying to level Zidane to 99 in the Evil Forest in Final Fantasy IX. 242 3.5-hour sessions later, spread over 4 years, and he's currently sitting at level 77. But the thing that strikes me most about watching 5 minutes of any one of these mind-numbing sessions is just how slow everything about FF9's combat is, how slow the battle transition is, how slowly units act in combat, how daunting everything feels when you realize that he'll need thousands of encounters to complete such a ludicrous challenge. Now, to be clear, I think FF9 is a classic and an outstanding game, and the fact that it's a weaker game for grinding isn't an indictment against the game, since it's not designed for a challenge like that, and it clearly isn't. The point I'm making is that I had no problem maxing every character in Bravely Default 2 on every single job. I don't even know why I was compelled to do it, but it was pretty easily doable because it had removed almost all friction to that pursuit. Encounters in Bravely Default 2 are fun, snappy, and easy to clear, especially with modern quality of life features that it has, like the ability to speed things up in combat. It can be argued that quality of life features like short load times, easy combat acquisition, and speed up mechanics don't necessarily make gameplay systems better than ones that lack it, but they absolutely make grinding more tolerable. They remove downtime, sluggishness, and friction points, and keep you button mashing as much as possible while you watch the points roll in. Progression matters, risk matters, well-designed systems matter. But do any of these things really matter if the player doesn't care in the first place? The simple fact is that many players actively choose to grind in games. When you think about popular franchises like Diablo, Path of Exile, RuneScape, and so many more, the foundation of these games rests on incentivizing players to grind their systems. But the reason I think it works so well in all aforementioned titles is because grinding is not padding the game or gatekeeping the content the players want. Grinding is the content, and players have full agency and incentive to do so. The player decides what items to chase, what builds to pursue, where to farm, and so on. The grind becomes self-directed. This is meaningfully different from level gating or forced grinds that some games like to impose upon you. This is why go kill boars until you hit level 20 is meaningfully different from I'm grinding this dungeon because there's an item drop I want. Even if the gameplay experiences are similar, we respond much more favorably to the grind we choose. This is why the term grinding, I think, can be a bit confusing in the first place, and how it's easy for us to talk past each other when we're trying to understand why some people hate it and others love it. Not all games are designed to be grinded in the same way as others, and more often than not, the player chooses where, when, and how much to grind. Grinding in Final Fantasy IX probably feels worse than grinding in RuneScape because the games have wildly different contexts. Your character's power level in Final Fantasy IX is designed to be a mere vehicle to help you reach the next story beat, while your character's power level in RuneScape is itself the destination you are working towards. This doesn't mean you're not free, like Circle Master, to choose a wild goal of making grinding the point of FF9, but it should perhaps be no wonder that games that are designed to be shorter, more linear experiences might hit a bit differently when we choose to engage with them as a grind as compared to games that are designed to retain your attention indefinitely. At the beginning of this video, I claimed that beneath our feelings on grinding lies something deeper. To answer William's question of what makes grinding good, what you really need to answer is the question of what gives a grind meaning. Why can some grinds make me want to invest in its gameplay loop, while others cannot? Good grinding is what happens when repetition is continuously recontextualized as meaningful engagement. It might be progression or milestones that transform the experience. Sometimes it's risk or mastery over the game's systems. Sometimes it's a wild, arbitrary goal that you've chosen for yourself. Milestones and rewards only matter if you want them. Risk and tension are fun if that's what you are looking for. Most games don't need grinding. They're usually designed to be completed on a casual playthrough, and most single-player experiences offer easy difficulty settings if you'd like. The question is almost never, do I need to grind? The question is, why am I grinding? Am I having fun doing this, or am I just trying to check off some box? Gameplay collapses into boredom and feels like grinding when meaning breaks down and you begin to doubt why you're doing it in the first place. So to answer William's question once and for all, good grinding isn't so much about the repetition itself, it's about whether the game can continually convince you that the repetition matters. And whether it does or doesn't is ultimately your call. This is Nick BRPG. This was a pretty fun experiment. Should I do more videos on fan-raised topics? If you enjoyed this video, consider helping out a small YouTuber with a like, comment, or a sub. The RPG discourse will continue. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.